Well, welcome back, James, to Exopolitics Today.
Oh, good to be back on your show.
Yeah, well, I was really impressed by this message you put out, the urgent message to humanity. You had your finger on the pulse of so many important issues. So you want to just explain, what you talked about in that message?
Yeah, I should have read it again first because it was a while back. I put so many messages out about that, but basically it's that we need to really rise to the occasion. We need to get our consciousness in order and adhere to universal law, which is very basic. It's universal peace, brother, sisterly love, individual freedom, and prosperity for everyone. And that's how the galactics and the higher dimensional beings operate. They all operate under universal law. And there are low-level entities that are wreaking havoc on the earth. They have for quite some time, and they're being cleaned up now. But we have to do our part. We have to rise to the occasion if we're going to have contact. And one of the reasons I wrote it was because, the ufology, unfortunately, has really focused on either nuts and bolts or something in the past or the fear, problem. And they never answer the questions, which when you see these like ancient aliens and all these other things, I spent an hour and a half with ancient aliens and I gave them all this information about who these beings are, why they're here, what their cultures are like, have they been here in the past? I gave them all that information. And the only thing you see is my hand reaching for a camera. Everything got censored out of it. And that's happened again and again and again. So for some reason, the upper echelons of the controlled narrative in ufology have decided to kind of squash anything of a spiritual nature, anything of you can't talk about spiritually and technologically advanced beings. There's just a few people, I know you covered that a lot, but there's just a few people that are actually covering this aspect of it. And now with this new disclosure thing, it's moving into a controlled narrative, and they won't cover, are there extremely spiritually and technologically advanced beings out there? Are some of them, billions, millions of years ahead of us in consciousness and technology? These questions, they won't go there. They're doing it again, and we've had contact with these beings for 40 years, and so it's getting kind of old, that this program that they're running, this controlled narrative. And the only good thing about it is now they admit that UFOs are real. They're not saying who they are, why they're here, or anything else. But now people are going to go out and start looking and doing their own research and sitting out and sky watching themselves and seeing things you can't explain. There's so many ships coming in now. It's just overwhelming. And I talked earlier about that. We filmed 1,200 ships in 3 months here in Hawaii, and I bring people out here all the time, and these are real salt to the earth, grounded people, and they go, well, they're probably out there, I'm not sure. And I said, well, why don't you just come and see them for yourself? I said, that's my whole thing. I go, come see, have your own experience the energy, see the ship, see them for yourself. And that's what people do. And so it's funny watching these people. And, they come and all of a sudden they'll see like 40 ships. That's the last guy who was here saw like 40 ships, and he was freaking out, but, if you, and do your meditation work and put the intention out there to have contact with the spiritually and technologically advanced ones and raise your frequency, they'll find you. You'll have your own connection, your own sighting, and then there's no dependency.
Well, I've noticed that was one of the things that became very apparent to me when I first got into this, back in 2001, that the kind of mainstream ufologists, those that get the most attention, they're not interested in the spiritual side. They're not interested in the positive, benevolent contacts with extraterrestrials. And people who focused on that, people like Wendell Stevens and Timothy Good. Wendell Stevens, he was just kind of like ostracized. And it seems that that's what they want to do. They want to make it They want to make ufology a science, just focusing on the craft and the kind of photo angles and the quality of the camera and all of that. And that's been going on for decades. But recently, I mean, as you said, there's been a shift. Now all of a sudden you've got the kind of like Pentagon getting involved, and now they're doing things like putting out some of the data, like the Tic Tac UFO. So they put out that 2004 case. So why are they doing that?
Well, it's a controlled narrative, and they have to keep a threat going because they can get the funding, to rise to the threat level supposedly, and really, it's really illogical. There's a lot of things that they haven't dealt with. That one is that in the interest of national security, the ones with the real firepower and technology are the benevolent ones, the very spiritually and technologically advanced ones. So in the interest of national security, we should be making friends with them. Because there are low-level ones that have technology too that we're outgunned, and so luckily we're getting a lot of help from the benevolent ones that are cleaning out a lot of the dumbs and the underground bases and a lot of the negative ETs. Most of that's cleaned up now, and because of them, this place would be a real mess. It'd be a reptilian F fest. I hate to say it, if it wasn't for the benevolent ones. So it's illogical. Sometimes I think of military intelligence, it's kind of not there, because the intelligent move would be to make friends with the benevolent ones. Now, there are contacts going on with the benevolent ones. I know people in very high level agencies, you might say, that these beings are walking around in the halls. And they say, they said, don't use my name, don't say anything about it. But they said there's like Orion Council of Light and Palladian beings that are walking down the corridors. And she goes, I look up at them and they smile and look at me, and there's an acknowledgement because they know I know. It's kind of a frequency acknowledgement. So there is a lot of that going on, and there's also been a lot of negative interactions and agreements made with negative ETs for technology and for ships and trades for, biology and abduction stuff and things like that. That's been going on too. So I think the reason they can't really talk about this, why they've been covering it up for so long, is because, a lot of them are using deadly force to shut people up for quite some time. And I've experienced that personally. I've been shot at. I've had my brake lines cut, my lug nuts taken off. I've been threatened by colonels, and it goes on and on. Just about everything. Character assassinated, poisoned. Food poisoning. Like weird. And so, luckily the higher dimensional beings keep putting me back together again. So which is nice, but it's. They're going to have to come clean about that they've made some really bad deals in the past, and they did it because they need to be one up on the technology for any wars or any other threats. And I understand that, but now it's time to evolve beyond that and start working with the benevolent ones and the spiritually and technologically advanced ones. If we want to take a quantum leap, in our evolution, which is basically where we're going right now.
Now, you mentioned the reptilians and how the deep underground bases are being cleared, that the benevolent ETs are working with the Earth Alliance or the White Hats to clear out the dumbs, to clear out whatever negative ETs are still left in there. So, I mean, that's really exciting. So where did you get that? I mean, how do you know? I mean, what did they tell you? Who told you about these dumbs being cleared out? And I mean, how far has that gone? Have they cleared out most? How much more time are they going to take to clear them out?
There's a very, very small amount left that are like really secured deep underground. They're they're actually sequestered. They can't do anything. They can't come out. They can't do anything. They're pretty much taken out. We still have a lot of hybrid stuff running around and corrupt politicians and things like that are, the global elite boys and things like that, and they're being taken out at the same time. So all of these, it's all about, if you're not frequency specific to the awakening and healing, and if you're not operating under universal law, you're going to have some very serious problems in the days to come, because the whole solar system is moving into a much higher frequency, and we have to raise our frequencies to match that. And so I tell people, this is so big, it's so huge, nobody can stop, what is coming. It's massive. And we're seeing it unfold in the political arena. We're seeing this big shift happening there. And we're getting back to basics again there. But it's still, there's still a lot of cleanup, especially in that area, and especially in the our government and our religions and even our business institutions. All of that has to align with the universal law if we're going to continue, because they're all going to implode. They're already crashing right now.
So that increasing frequencies, I mean, is that because we've entered a particular area of the galaxy, the kind of photon belt?
Yeah.
What's causing the increasing frequency and kind of triggering this great awakening?
Well, we're moving into a highly energized place in space, and this has been written out. All the prophecies talk about this. And as we move into that energy, we have to raise our own frequencies. And it's a combination of things. It's like the source itself. There's energies coming in from Cygnus, all these other locations. NASA knows about it. They don't know where some of these energies are coming in from that are hitting the Earth. We're getting massive. Right now, we're getting bombed by solar flares and X-class and M-class flares. And the electromagnetic light spectrum is off the scale, and there's new bands now. The Schumann resonance has been off the scale. It's finally quieted down a little bit, but I think it's going to pick up again real quick. But I mean, all the evidence is there, but a lot of the physicists don't understand what's behind it. And they have to understand how real physics work, like metaphysics, where everything goes from consciousness to light to energy to mass to the physical. And so consciousness is driving this. And it's a much greater consciousness, and it's whatever you want to call it, the absolute God, creator, great spirit is driving this. That's what's driving this. And the beautiful many that serve, God, creator, great spirit, whatever name you want to give it, are all aligned with this. And the sun is behind it. The sun is just blasting. It's so massive, you can't stop it. But most people are just kind of running around with like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to figure out what's going on, and all their issues are coming up, and all their wounds and traumas and wrong conclusions from past experience are being amplified and triggered and surfacing, and that's all part of the process. And so I tell people, chaos is the healing. The chaos you're seeing is the healing unfolding, and we can do it. We can go the easy way or the hard way, but we are going to go. It's like resistance is futile,
What's going on with these deep state officials that have been working with the negative ETs? I mean, you had Jim Mars, his book Ruled by Secrecy.
Yeah.
You kind of laid that out, exposed that. So people who have been working with the negative ETs, what's happening to them now?
Well, they've lost their backing. They've lost their puppet masters are being taken out, and so they're floundering. And a lot of the global elite, all those guys are backed by some very, whatever you want to call it, satanic, Luciferian, demonic, royal reptilian, negative grays, all that stuff has been at play here, and it's all being cleaned up and taken out. So a lot of them, if you see a lot of them, they're not functioning very well. They can't they're even spilling the beans on themselves all the time because they've lost their puppet master, and they've depended on technology and some other really nasty ceremonies to stay young and keep alive, and so they're all just like imploding right now. That whole program is imploding. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's happening so fast now. It's just exponentially getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so whatever you want to call it, the Great Awakening, the quickening, the ascension, everybody has different names for it. It's in high gear right now. And that's why all the ships are here. That's why everybody's seeing ships everywhere. And again, that's why they have to disclose, because they can't hide it anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, you have this control system that's lasted for millennia, with the negative extraterrestrials working with deep state or the Illuminati, the Cabal. But now you've got this kind of frequency that's increasing, that we're moving into this high frequency band. And we've got the benevolent extraterrestrials that are returning, and you call them our ancient ancestors. So you want to talk a little bit about the ones that have just returned? I mean, you know, who are they? How evolved are these ancient ancestor ETs that have just returned?
Well, some of them actually were here at least 600 million years ago, and they built tunnels, and they have glass-lined tunnels and everything. They found some in Brazil recently that are 300 million years old, and so somebody had some extreme technology back then. And you know, with dinosaurs roaming around on the ground, I'm sure they probably lived underground most of the time. You know, just because you don't want to get snagged by a Tyrannosaurus Rex or something. But the you know, they've been here forever. The Ahians was the oldest. I asked them what was the oldest race that we would ever find any trace of them being here, and they called them the Ahians. And I wrote it on my, I can't remember when they were here, at least 600 million years ago. And so what's happened with Earth, and unfortunately we aren't teaching this, is that Earth has been a series of colonies. And the ones we do have knowledge of, and there's artifacts of and proof of, go back to ancient Lyra. And that would be the Anunnaki, that people call the early ancient Lyrians. They came from Lyra. And Lyra is the root race, and the Pleiadians came from Lyra. Those are their ancestors. And the Orion Council of Light, they're tied to the Lyrians as well. And so there's a lot of subgroups that are humanoid like us that are extremely evolved, very advanced, and very loving. And then there's some that are really different from us, that were they're adaptations to their environment or their planet. And we've got photographs of them. We have the little ET guys in the robes, you know, standing in the middle of our field. We filmed them. And I asked some of my guides, I said, who are these guys? And they said, these are the ancient ones, the old ones. And they said, they are the masters of the masters. They taught the masters. And so, you know, this goes way, way back. And, you know, we fell and we all had to start over as primitives due to cataclysms and great wars and things like that. And so some say we're the fifth, some say we're the sixth civilization to start over on the planet. And some of our ancient ancestors were extremely evolved, both spiritually and technologically.
These ancient ancestor ETs going back, you know, hundreds of millions of years. I mean, if they are the ones that have this very high frequency, then I imagine that's probably why a lot of the negative ETs have left.
Yeah.
Decided there's no point being around with these highly evolved beings that know exactly what's going on, and, you know, karmic consequences. Yeah, you want to talk about that? Because I imagine that these negative ETs, like the Draco reptilians or the Orion Greys that operate at the high level, they know that, you know, the karmic consequences of doing stuff, so they manipulate people to do the negative stuff.
Yeah.
So so what is the effect of these benevolent ones on these dark ETs?
Yeah. This is like a real gray area kind of, but literally, but some of the we do know about the Amaru, and those they're still existing in those caves in Vietnam. I'm trying to remember the cave. I think I wrote it down. They're also in I think in the Sangdong caves that they found in Vietnam, and then they're also in Peru, and they're in the they're also in Cusco as well. And so they went and they filled in all their openings in Cusco and Peru. They shut them all off, and they're still operating. And these guys, and they also in India they call them the Nagas, which are serpent, type beings. And I think the whole Adam and Eve story, the serpent was a serpent, wasn't a snake. It was a serpent being, because there's serpent beings, there's the royal reptilians. The serpent beings are the ancient ones. They're not dragons, they're a different group, and you never see their face. They wear cloaks, and they always have their hood down, and you just hardly ever see their face. But they're the really ancient ones. And then you've got the royal reptilians, they're the wing ones, and then you got the Dracos, and you got all those other groups. So there were some beings here a long, long time ago, and they've either gone underground and moved on, and I think they're just kind of doing their own thing and staying away, and they're tied into the Hindu culture, and they don't call them bad. They just said they're different and they do their own thing. But there are a lot of them that are just have no respect for humanity whatsoever. I mean, some of them would just see us as a food source, basically, which is sad. And that's been going on for quite some time, and they've been taken out. But the effects that happen, I'll tell you one experience I had, and, as a counselor, I can't mention names, but I've had people that were bodyguards to, royal family and things like that, and come to the ranch, and they had some things attached to them, and they had to get rid of them. And as soon as we sat down, I felt Baba G come in, and I called on Baba G and Yeshua, or Jesus. Some people call him Jesus. But, I called on them, and I saw these two reptilians standing behind this guy, and they bowed all the way down to the ground, and they wouldn't look up, and then the guy started telling me, like, channeling these beings, and he started saying, you need to know something. We have information, this is, and trying to, like, get me to contract or agree with them. And I said, you have nothing. You have nothing I want, nothing I need. And they go, you need to know this, something's coming, and tried to get me in fear. So I'd talk with them. And I said, no, you just need to leave. I have no business with you here. And so I called on the higher beings, and then they backed away and just left. And so they really hate the divine feminine. Excuse me, the divine feminine really messes them up for some reason, because I think the feminine energy by nature is more subjective. It can channel more of the creator energy through them, and that loves the ultimate power. And so I know the divine feminine really messes them up. They get out of there quick, with that kind of energy. It's highly underrated. People don't realize that. I think there's many reasons for suppressing the divine feminine, and that's one of them. And go ahead.
Yeah, you wrote a book, The Anunnaki Return, Star Nations in the Days to Come, and you made the point that this particular group, the Anunnaki that have returned, that they've come back to free us and not conquer us. And that's, you want to talk to that, because that's a very important distinction there, because, many are very fearful of some ETs wanting to conquer us. And, there's some very prominent people that are pushing the idea that the Anunnaki are doing a good cop, bad cop routine on us. And they're really trying to, conquer us again. So, can you talk about that?
Well, what happened is the Anunnaki, when they came here, they set up their civilizations or their encampments, and then started building, and the big stone temples and all this stuff. And, you know, they were doing their thing. And then they started getting into turf wars, and they started dividing. And there was kind of a big divide between, one of the worst ones was Marduk, who made a pact with the reptilians and turned on his own people. And he was aligned with Enlil, unfortunately. And Enki was the good guy. He was the geneticist that really wanted to, you know, he kept adding more and more of their DNA to the knuckle draggers that were here. And he was creating, you know, very advanced beings. And they got really pissed because unfortunately, or fortunately, I'd say unfortunately for them is that the knuckle draggers, and we're talking about the Denisovian man and a lot of the other ones, you know, the Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal and things like that. Well, a lot of those guys, they were in awe and they're in total service mode of the gods, the little g gods, you know. And so they were wide open. And then they added their genes to them, and they're in total service mode. And they added their genes to them. And what it created was a hybrid that was evolving past some of the Anunnaki, because they were, a lot of them kind of got into the spiritual ego, and they got into the, you know, they're warring on each other. And like Enlil was a defeated warrior. A lot of people have that turned around. They don't realize what really happened. He was actually here, and he was a defeated warrior, you know, from the heavens, you might say. And so there's a lot that went down there, you know, during that time. And that's how draconian law got inserted, because of Marduk and a pact he made with the reptilians, and he went against his own people. So they had all these wars and turf wars. They used weapons beyond our imagination, even beyond nuclear. And they end up wiping themselves out, you know, doing this. And so a lot of them left because there was a coming pole shift at the time, and a lot of them just got on their ships and left. And they continued to evolve, and they said, we're not going to participate in these turf wars and these division games. And they continued to evolve. And a lot of this was 450,000 years ago. So a lot of these beings are now in the sixth dimension. They're highly evolved beings, very powerful beings. And they're returning, and they are holding accountable the fallen Anunnaki, the ones that went against universal law. And so they're doing, that's kind of karmically, they have a cleanup there to do. And they're also taking care of a lot of the, you know, because of the pact that was made with the reptilians, they're taking care of that mess as well. And so, and they're doing it in conjunction with the Andromedans and the Pleiadians and the Orion Council of Light and the Sirians and a whole group of Arcturians and a whole other group of benevolent beings. They're all working together now, doing this major planetary liberation that they're under. And it's kind of rough, because before their hands were tied because of the Prime Directive and things like that, but that's gone now. The gloves are off, and they brought, and the Pleiadians brought in these, they're like Jedi warriors is the best way I can explain them. That's all they do. They have their own planet, and that's all they do is train. And Siavon is one of them. He's one of the major guys that came here, and they brought them in because they're not, the Pleiadians aren't really warriors, but they have their warriors. They're a very highly evolved place, just very blissful, loving beings. You know, you fall in love when you meet them, you fall in love with them. Just they exude love, and they're beautiful. But you know, a lot of them that they find war very distasteful and things like that. So they have their own groups, their own warriors. And I'll tell you a little thing funny is when I saw Siavon, I told him, I said, you know, you look like Superman. This is just too weird. And he said, well, we are very close to that. You know, we're very, we have a lot of those abilities. And he was wearing this is really weird. He was wearing a cape, a red cape. And I said, I go, come on, you know, this is like Marvel Comics time or something like that. And I said, so are you the guys they keep filming down in Mexico that are flying through the sky? And he goes, yeah, that's us. You know? So they're doing a lot of cleanup in South America and Mexico, and that's why all these things are being filmed down there. There's so many ships down there because that's a stronghold for the fallen ones and the reptilians and a lot of the low level stuff.
What do you know of Saturn? The Saturn apparently was a major base for the fallen Anunnaki, Marduk and Enlil, and more recently, Saturn apparently has been handed over to the Earth Alliance.
Yeah.
So what do you know about Saturn and what's happening up there now and Saturn's moons and so forth?
To be honest with you, I don't know a lot about that. I've heard from them talking about how they were talking about the moon, and the moon's an artificial construct. It's actually a terraforming planet that was brought here. And in history, we had no moon, then we had two moons, and now we have one moon, So and that the moon's been going back and forth for a long time between the Gray Alliance, the Orion Alliance, which are the negative ones. And, that's the reptilians and negative grays and those guys and some bugs and a few other things involved. But it's been going back and forth, and I'm pretty sure we have it again. The last time I checked is the galactic guys and the big hitters came in and they took it back again. So I'm pretty sure we're back in control of the moon. And a lot of they said that they're just systematically going through and cleaning them out. And so a lot of their strongholds and a lot of their places, and a lot of them have been kind of sequestered back on their own planet. They're saying, no, you're done. You can't interfere anymore with, other civilizations and things like that. So there's just a major cleanup. And then for a while here, there was no ships. And I go, what's going on? There's no ships. I haven't seen any ships in the past 3 or 4 days. And that's happened twice before. And I asked them what's going on. And they said, well, there were reinforcements that were coming, like draconian reinforcements. And they said they cut them off at the pass. They didn't let them come, they dispatched them. So, and so they've been very busy working hard on our behalf. And that's the thing. That's the thing that I find frustrating, I guess. That's the best word I can say is like, why are we not acknowledging this? Why are we not acknowledging the benevolent ones that are working on our behalf, that are very spiritually and technologically very ancient, and they're waiting. They want to work with it. Some are working with us through certain factions, and but why aren't we talking about that? Why aren't we saying, hey, humanity, we need to get our act together. We need to live under universal law. We need to stop all this competition and war and the war and disease profiteers, put an end to this and get on with our evolution. And so I don't know. I do know why, and it's because basically the war and disease profiteers have been running the show, and that's coming to an end now too. That's all collapsing in on itself.
So I know there's a lot of division at the moment in terms of what is happening at the in our solar system and around the Earth. Some people are putting out information that that the negative ETs are there, they're controlling, and they're about to stage some kind of false flag or some real alien invasion. And then there are others that say, well, the negative ETs have been forced to leave because the positive ones have arrived and the frequencies are too high for the negatives to hang around. So what's left are their minions. So where do you kind of stand on all of that?
Well, I think that whole false flag thing, I don't think that's going to work because too many people know. Two people know that Project Blue Beam and all these things they were going to try to do. And I think they are trying in certain areas. They're trying to launch and see what happens and see if people fall for it. But the benevolent ones are intervening on a lot of that and not allowing that to happen. I would be surprised. I mean, they might try a few things here and there, but they're going to get busted. And it's kind of a push-pull. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We keep doing that over and over again. It's like people ask me all the time, when are they going to do the EBS? When are they going to do this? And I said, you can't use time as we know it, because it's a series of events. And one event will trigger the next event and the next event. If that event doesn't happen, the plans change. And it's always changing. And I don't even think that the actual guys that are going to make the final decision even know when it's going to happen. I mean, they have a ballpark figure, but they're watching other events. And I think this last election actually really helped in circumventing some very nasty stuff that was getting ready to happen. And we're getting back on track again. And thank God. But, what they had planned for us was so ugly. I mean, if people knew what they really had planned for us, they wouldn't be in support at all, of this other.
Really more a restoration of the original timeline that in 2020, of course, everyone knows about what happened with the election. Wasn't that really a kind of intervention by the negative factions to shift us onto a different? That's what it felt like. I mean, to me and my wife and a lot of others, that it just felt like the timeline just got hijacked. But now we're back on, where we should have been back in 2020. Yeah. Just with a 4-year delay.
Yeah, that's a really good subject, because I have some friends that are highly sensitive, and I feel it too. And I feel when the timeline shifts, and they've been collapsing these timelines one after another, and the negative timelines are collapsing constantly, and the positive ones are we're getting back on the positive track now. And what's funny, when you're sensitive, you'll feel it. You'll go, oh God, man, this is like impending doom. Something really bad is going to happen. This doesn't feel good. And all of a sudden it just goes away. And you go, what happened? What just happened? And what they did is they collapsed that timeline. And so those events didn't happen. And I think a lot of the agendas, of the global elite, and the eugenicists and those guys, all of those guys, their timelines have collapsed, and they're trying to recreate them, but it's not going to work. But we're locked into the positive timeline, and they can't stop it now. It's done. And so.
Yeah, I know people often say, well, if there are these positive extraterrestrials around, why don't they just come in and clean up our planet? And it's just like, well, they've been doing that. I mean, you look at this timeline. I mean, during the Biden administration, there were so many points in there where things could have gone south with some really bad events, false flag event, black swan events. But what I could kind of feel, and you can elaborate, is that every time when some really dark event was about to happen, like you said, the timeline would collapse, or the positive ETs would intervene and kind of circumvent that. So it's nothing really bad happened.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around, but a lot of these wars are temporal wars, and they have to do with timelines and everything else. And I said, think about this. Let's say, this really messes people's heads, but let's say you're on a ship, and that ship can actually jump and create 4 ships with the exact same crew, same ship, everything. How would you deal with that, knowing there was 3 other of you out there on the exact same ship? How would you feel about meeting yourself? And it really messes with your identity. And then you really think about it. Say, what if that ship got blown up, and the other ship came in and say, hey, we're gonna go back in time, and we're gonna move them over here, so they're not gonna get blown up. And so that other timeline that they were on, where they all died, just got collapsed, and now they're back on. It's really hard to wrap your head around, because time's nothing to them. And they've mastered time, distance, and space. They can jump forward or backward, do whatever they want, basically. And even the ascended masters can do that. They can bilocate and do all that. I've got a pesky mosquito here trying to feed another.
Lion mosquitoes.
Yeah, but So it's kind of like I had an identity crisis at one time, because I had beings appearing to me. I had on my soul level, because we're multidimensional beings and we exist on a vibrational continuum. We're not just this meat suit and this body. We're a soul, and that soul's eternal. And so I had my past lives come to me, and one was an old Viking warrior, and he appeared, and he was a little emotionally upset, and so I had to do healing on that and reclaim that part of myself, and then this other being on a soul level appeared to me, and he was in robes, and he was a master, and he's going, I'm on your Christ self, or your fifth dimensional self, and then I go, okay, and then these other beings kept appearing to me, and they're saying, I am you. And so I was having a meltdown. I'm going, who am I? I mean, what is this? And then Ezekiel, which is seventh dimensional being, which is Cassia and Ezekiel, which merged together, came in, and he told me, he said, you're my hands and feet. And I said, okay, I said, and I go, I'm really struggling here. Everybody's saying this and that, and I have no idea who I am anymore. And finally he said, it's all you. And then I finally got the aha moment. I go, you know what? The one consciousness, that encompasses all consciousness and all planes and dimensions is within everyone. And it is all us. And we live in this unified field of consciousness and energy, and it's really a mind screw when that realization happens, because everything else just kind of falls away, and you realize there's so much more to the picture, and the little the bad relationship, the money issues, all that stuff just becomes a non-issue. It just doesn't matter anymore. All those entrapments just kind of go away. But I think I like what the lamas say. They said that the reason we have so many personal problems is because we think we're a person. We don't realize who we really are, and we're identifying with the meat suit and the body and social consciousness, and we don't realize we're actually a multidimensional being going all the way back to the source.